Mario Canseco at Research Co. has released an interesting poll today, and it's on COVID-19 and how people are perceiving government performance, for instance. And what really caught my eye on this is the difference between BC and Alberta. So in BC, Premier John Horgan has got the highest ratings in the country, and right next door, Premier Jason Kenney has got the lowest rating. So we're going to talk to Mario about that, and welcome to the interview, Mario.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Now, tell us a little bit about the ratings in general, but particularly the BC and Alberta results.
Well, we have been tracking this since April, trying to get a sense of how Canadians feel about the way specific levels of government have been handling COVID-19. The federal government has always been somewhere between 65 and 70% when it comes to the numbers. But what we see here is a big shift, particularly in the western provinces. Alberta has consistently been ranked the lowest, but this time around, they're lower than 50%. There's only 46% of Albertans who are satisfied with how their own government has handled COVID-19. That is down from 57% a couple of months ago. And in British Columbia, we have the highest level of satisfaction at 70%, which is also down from 83% at the start of the fall. So we do see a drop for most of the provinces on this issue, particularly. We're heading into the holidays. There's a lot of people who are worried about what is going to be happening with the pandemic. But the numbers are at the lowest level that we've ever recorded for any of the foremost populous provinces in the country in Alberta.
Now, what I find interesting about this is that I get the press releases from both provinces. And the perception in British Columbia is that Dr. Bonnie Henry and the BC government is trying to be proactive, and they take this threat really seriously. But the truth is that Dr. Bonnie, it took her a long time to get to a mandatory masking rule. And the government has been kind of behind in some of the other areas. It's got a big outbreak in the Fraser Valley, which it really hasn't got under control yet, which is responsible for where their numbers are at today. But in Alberta, the perception there is that Premier Jason Kenney and his UCP government have essentially walked away. That's the perception, and I think that's reflected in your numbers.
It is. I think it's a situation where there was a difficulty in Alberta in figuring out a way to connect with the pandemic that would remove some of the protagonism from Jason Kenney. He wanted to be there. He wanted to be at some of the press conferences. He wanted to be the one to say things. And in a very smart way, the NDP government here in British Columbia said, look, we're going to let Bonnie Henry do her thing. We'll have Adrian Dix as the Minister of Health saying a few things here or there. But we need her to be the voice of reason here. We don't want to turn this into something that is coming out of the Premier's office. And that's definitely been one of the problems in Alberta. They haven't had the same level of satisfaction because of the way in which they are talking about some of these things. And even though we've seen some difficulties in getting policy through, particularly when it comes to masks, now we're at a situation where 82% of Canadians are saying that they wear a mask all the time. So it took a long while to get there. But in some provinces, the message isn't getting out there, partly because of how it has been handled politically. And I think that is the case next door.
Yeah, I would agree wholeheartedly with you, because at the beginning of the pandemic, Premier Kenney was basically taking the lead, giving the doctors presentations for her. And then as things began to turn, he stopped showing up at press conferences. It's been a very inconsistent performance on this file for the Premier. And one of the things I've found interesting in your numbers is the highly satisfied numbers in BC are very high. They're up around 20%. They're very low in Alberta. They're basically the same on moderately satisfied. And then the dissatisfaction numbers for Alberta are very high compared to.
Well, that is one of the biggest problems here, because one of the things that we've noticed, particularly when you're asking about satisfaction, is you have a high number of residents who are moderately satisfied. Well, we're not looking as badly as the States. I think the government has done a pretty good job. But we see a lot of that municipally, for instance, because a lot of people are just saying, well, it's not a problem in my municipality, and I think we're fine. But when you have that level of moderate dissatisfaction becoming strong dissatisfaction, then that's a big, big issue for the government. And that is the situation that they find themselves in right now. You know, you look at the number of cases a couple of months ago in Alberta, it was nowhere near what it is today. And you still had a little bit of dissatisfaction with the way things were handled. So Now that you have the highest number of cases in the entire country for some days, it's starting to turn from moderate dissatisfaction with the way the government has been handling this to something that will definitely come back and haunt them. You know, we saw the situation in the United States. Donald Trump was not necessarily seen as a good manager of the COVID-19 pandemic, and he's going to be out of the White House in a month.
Final question, Mario. Given the amount of Trudeau bashing in Western Canada, you'd think that he was mishandling the pandemic horribly, but Canadians really are quite satisfied. And even I noticed, I think it was just under half of Albertans are quite pleased with the Prime Minister's handling of the pandemic. Were you surprised by that?
The numbers are definitely better for Justin Trudeau in Alberta, and in a couple of surveys that we've done as we've been tracking this, his numbers have been actually higher than what Jason Kenney's been getting. So you have a little bit of that dissatisfaction with the way Ottawa has been treating Alberta. It's not going to go away necessarily. I don't think it's going to turn them into closet separatists at any point, but there's certainly a higher level of connection with the government that they had. And I think one of the reasons for Jason Kenney's popularity at some point was the fact that he was going to be that counterpoint to Justin Trudeau. Now they are at roughly the same levels. If anything, Justin Trudeau is doing a little bit better than he was at the start of the pandemic, and Jason Kenney is starting to drop. So it's definitely a difficulty when it comes to establishing that emotional connection with the population and saying this is what we all have to do. The messages have been all over the place, and this is why people are dissatisfied.
Mario, thank you very much. This has been very insightful, and we really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you.